Karen never asked permission. She simply acted as though rules didn't apply to her. Every few days, her shiny black SUV plowed through Daniel Carter's ranch gate, rattling the hinges and leaving dust clouds in her wake. At 40, Daniel had seen plenty of stubborn neighbors, but nothing like this. His ranch, his fence, his gate, none of it seemed to matter to the HOA president who believed her title made her queen of Oak Ridge. When he filed complaints, the board waved him off. When he demanded repairs, they fined him. But what Karen didn't know was that Daniel had patience, evidence, and a plan. And the day she pushed too far, she drove straight into her own trap. Daniel Carter was a man who preferred the quiet hum of cicadas over the endless chatter of meetings. At 40, he lived alone on a 10-acre ranch that had been in his family for generations. Every morning he rose before the sun, brewed strong black coffee, and walked his fence line with a practiced eye. His hands were rough from years of mending posts, his boots worn from pacing gravel paths. He didn't want much from life beyond peace, a sturdy gate, and a bit of privacy, but Oak Ridge wasn't built for peace anymore. When the HOA formed 5 years back, Daniel had been skeptical. They promised community improvements, but all he saw was paperwork, power grabs, and neighbors whispering about who painted their mailbox the wrong shade of beige. Still, Daniel kept his distance. He paid the required fees, nodded politely when neighbors passed, and minded his land. That all changed the first time Karen drove her SUV through his gate. It was a Saturday afternoon, and Daniel was mending a section of fence near the road when he heard the engine. He turned just in time to see a glossy black SUV barrel down the gravel drive, ignoring the clearly marked sign that read, "Private Ranch Road. No through access." The gate, freshly painted and locked, shuddered violently as Karen rammed it open. Wood splintered, the lock snapped, and the SUV sailed through in a cloud of dust, leaving Daniel coughing and furious. He raised his arms, shouting, but the vehicle didn't even slow. Through the tinted glass, he caught a glimpse of Karen herself. Oversized sunglasses, blonde curls, a satisfied smirk as though daring him to stop her. That night, Daniel replaced the gate. 2 days later, she did it again and again, every time. The same ritual repeated. Karen's SUV tearing through, the gate sagging under the impact, Daniel cursing under his breath as he hauled out his tools. Neighbors saw it happen. Some shook their heads, others avoided eye contact. But no one spoke against her. After all, she was the HOA president. Finally, Daniel had had enough. He filed a complaint, carefully documenting each incident. He attached photographs of his broken gate, receipts for new wood, even video footage from a small trail cam he'd mounted on the fence. The HOA board called him in. Sitting in the cramped clubhouse, Daniel laid out his evidence. Karen sat opposite him, dressed in a bright floral blouse, heels tapping impatiently. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding his eyes. When he finished, the chair of the board, Schultz, cleared his throat. "Mr. Carter, while we understand your frustrations, your gate has been deemed a community obstruction. It restricts traffic flow. Mrs. Karen has merely been exercising her right to access community land." Daniel's jaw tightened. "That's not community land. That's my ranch road. This gate has stood since before the HOA even existed." But the board only nodded sympathetically. To Karen. Then came the letter the next week. A fine, not against Karen, but against Daniel. "Failure to maintain proper accessibility," it read. Daniel crumpled it in his fist. They wanted him quiet. They wanted him submissive. But Daniel Carter wasn't about to bow to corruption. Not over his land. Not ever. The letter was still on his counter when the knock came. A heavy, impatient rapping that rattled the screen door. Daniel wiped his hands on a rag and opened it to find exactly who he expected. Karen herself, standing tall in a sharp red pantsuit, clipboard in hand like she was there to audit his very existence. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice sweet on the surface but dripping with superiority. "We need to discuss your gate." Daniel leaned against the door frame, unimpressed. "You mean the gate you keep driving through?" Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed. "That gate is an obstruction. Our community bylaws clearly state that no resident may impede reasonable neighborhood traffic flow. Your gate creates a bottleneck. It makes access inconvenient for homeowners who wish to pass through your little ranch. Daniel's brows furrowed. My little ranch? Karen, that road is on my deed. It's not a community easement. It's been Carter land since my grandfather's time. You and your SUV have no business driving through it. Karen flipped a page on her clipboard. I'm not here to argue deeds. I'm here to inform you that the HOA board has voted unanimously. You will remove that gate by the end of the month. If you fail to comply, fines will continue to accrue. Currently, you owe $450. Daniel's jaw clenched. For protecting my own land? Karen sighed as if speaking to a stubborn child. For violating community standards. You're part of Oak Ridge, Mr. Carter. That means you must abide by its rules. The board and I have determined the gate must go. End of discussion. She turned as if the matter were already settled, striding down his porch steps with the click of expensive heels against wood. Daniel called after her, voice steady but hard. Karen, this land isn't yours. It isn't the board's. You don't get to rewrite history because it's convenient. That gate stays. Karen paused, one manicured hand on her SUV door. Then she looked back with a grin that made his stomach twist. We'll see about that. The next week, the pressure campaign began. Flyers appeared on doorsteps across Oak Ridge, neatly printed sheets accusing Daniel of blocking access and endangering emergency response times. A few neighbors repeated the talking points like parrots, telling him to think of the children who supposedly needed quicker routes through his land. At the grocery store, he overheard whispers, "That Carter man is trouble." At the feed store, a longtime friend avoided his eyes, mumbling something about not wanting to get involved. Karen's campaign worked. The HOA board backed her every word. By the second week, Daniel received another fine, this one over $700. Then came a notice threatening legal action if he continued to obstruct community access. He didn't sleep much that night, sitting at his desk under the dim glow of a lamp. He pulled out the original deed papers, yellowed but clear. The land was his, the road his. The HOA was bluffing, but bluff or not, they were weaponizing power, reputation, and fear. And worst of all, most of his neighbors believed them. Daniel knew one thing. If he didn't push back now, Karen wouldn't just take his gate. She'd take his land, his peace, maybe even his future. He folded the deed carefully, placed it in a folder marked Evidence, and set it on the table. The board thought they had cornered him. They thought his silence meant surrender. But Daniel Carter was a patient man. And when pushed far enough, he was a dangerous one. By the third month, Daniel realized the fines weren't a tactic. They were a weapon. Every week, a new envelope appeared in his mailbox, stamped with the HOA's seal in bold red ink. One claimed his fence posts were non-compliant. Another accused him of improper landscaping. The most absurd one fined him $150 for having unapproved gravel coloration on his driveway. Each notice felt like a fresh slap, designed not to enforce rules, but to break his spirit. He pinned the letters to a corkboard in his kitchen. By midsummer, the board sagged under the weight of paper, each sheet evidence of the board's obsession with punishing him. Neighbors noticed too, but not in the way he hoped. On a hot July afternoon, Daniel walked into the Oak Ridge General Store to buy feed. Conversations hushed the moment he stepped inside. He caught fragments of whispered sentences. That Carter man's always fighting the board. Doesn't he know he's making it worse for all of us? At the register, Marlene, an older widow who once baked pies for everyone on the block, refused to meet his eyes. Karen says you've been deliberately blocking fire trucks, she murmured. If something happened, how would they reach my home? Daniel's voice was steady, but his stomach twisted. Marlene, the fire trucks have always used Oak Ridge Drive. My gate doesn't block anyone. Karen's lying to you. But Marlene only shook her head, the seed of doubt firmly planted. By evening, more cracks appeared in the community. Neighbors who once waved when passing his ranch now avoided the road altogether. Some crossed the street when they saw him. A few, emboldened by Karen's rhetoric, shouted insults from the safety of their lawns. The worst came when Schultz, the gray-haired board member, showed up with two others. They parked just outside Daniel's gate, clipboards in hand, snapping photos like he was a criminal. "What do you think you're doing?" Daniel asked, walking down the drive. "Inspection," Schultz said smoothly, though his eyes flicked nervously. "Your property has multiple violations." "Violations?" Daniel echoed. "Or excuses?" One of the others, Janet, a sharp-tongued woman who clung to Karen like a shadow, snapped a photo of his barn. "Your siding paint isn't HOA-approved beige." "That'll be another fine," Daniel laughed bitterly. "This barn was standing before half this neighborhood was even built." "You people have no authority here," Schultz pursed his lips. "We'll let the county courts decide that." And with that, they turned and left, leaving Daniel standing at his own gate, fury burning under his calm exterior. That night, Daniel sat on his porch, watching the gravel road stretch out beneath the stars. He had grown up here. Every fence post, every tree, every inch of this land held his father's sweat, his grandfather's labor, his own blood from years of ranching. And now strangers, neighbors he once trusted, were trying to strip it away piece by piece. It wasn't just about a gate anymore. It was about control. Karen was more than an entitled neighbor. She was orchestrating a campaign, bending the board to her will, twisting the community against him. The board's power wasn't in rules. It was in fear. People complied because they were afraid of fines, of harassment, of being singled out like he was. But fear had never been enough to move Daniel Carter. He walked inside, opened the folder with his deed, and laid it beside the stack of violation letters. Together they told a story, one of corruption, overreach, and abuse, and Daniel knew exactly what to do with a story like that. The first sign that things had gone too far came on a muggy August morning. Daniel walked down to his gate, coffee in hand, only to find the hinges torn clean off the post. The lock was gone. Deep ruts in the gravel told the story. Karen, or someone acting under her orders, had forced it open in the night. But what struck Daniel wasn't just the destruction. It was the note nailed to the broken gatepost. In bold marker, written in Karen's unmistakable looping script, it read, "Community access restored." "You're welcome." Daniel's fist clenched so hard his coffee sloshed over his boots. This wasn't just trespass anymore. It was sabotage. By noon, his phone buzzed with another HOA notice. "Emergency removal of unsafe structure," it declared, citing the gate as a hazard to community traffic. Attached was a photo of his broken gate, as if he had left it that way. The fine, $950 that afternoon, Daniel caught Karen at it herself. Her SUV rolled down his gravel road, windows lowered, her blonde curls bouncing as she leaned out, calling to a group of neighbors she had invited to watch. "See?" she said loudly. "He leaves it wide open. Anyone could wander in. Total hazard. This is why we had to step in." The neighbors nodded uncertainly, swayed by her confidence. Daniel stepped out from his barn, voice calm but cutting. "Funny, Karen, since I woke up to find my gate ripped apart with your handwriting nailed to it." Karen's eyes widened for a fraction of a second before she recovered, plastering on a bright smile. "Oh, Daniel, always so dramatic. Why don't you just admit it? This road is more useful without your silly little gate. Everyone can see that." The neighbors chuckled nervously. A few shuffled away, not wanting to be caught in the middle. That night, Daniel's patience finally snapped. He drove into town and met with Grant Holloway, a longtime friend and local lawyer who had seen more than his share of HOA abuses. Grant flipped through the stack of fines, violation notices, and photographs Daniel had brought. His brow furrowed deeper with every page. "This isn't enforcement," Grant muttered. "This is harassment. They're targeting you deliberately, hoping to bankrupt you or force you out." Daniel nodded. "That's what it feels like. They're using fear and paperwork as weapons." Grant tapped the deed Daniel had placed on the desk. "This is your shield. This land predates the HOA. They can't dictate what you do with your gate or your road, but we need more than paperwork. We need proof of their abuse, proof that can turn this community against them." Daniel leaned back, silent for a moment. His mind returned to Karen's smirk, her SUV tearing down his road, her laugh as neighbors whispered. Proof, he thought. Yes, he could do that. The next day, Daniel began setting traps. Not the kind with steel jaws or spring triggers, but the kind that caught lies instead of limbs. He installed hidden cameras along his road, angled toward the gate. He wired a motion sensor to record audio whenever a vehicle crossed the property line. He even mounted a small drone on standby, ready to capture overhead footage. Karen thought she was untouchable. The board thought their words carried more weight than his deeds. But Daniel knew something they didn't. Truth has a way of catching up. As he bolted the last camera into place, Daniel whispered to himself, "Let's see who's smiling when the lights are on." And for the first time in months, a small spark of satisfaction flickered in his chest. Because now, the game had shifted. Karen had declared war, but Daniel was no longer playing defense. For weeks, Karen strutted around Oak Ridge like a queen whose throne could never be challenged. She believed every flyer, every fine, every whisper had cemented Daniel as the villain of the neighborhood. What she didn't know was that every arrogant step she took onto his land, every sneer, every drive through his broken gate, was being recorded. The first recording came on a Tuesday afternoon. Karen's SUV crept down the gravel road, slowing near Daniel's barn. She leaned out the window, shouting to her passenger, another board member named Roger. The microphone hidden in the post caught every word. "If we keep this up, he'll fold," Karen said with a laugh. "Nobody fights the HOA and wins. We'll have his ranch land cleared for community expansion by next year. Mark my words." Roger chuckled, adding, "The fines alone will bury him." Daniel watched the footage that night on his laptop, jaw tightening. There it was. Proof of intent. Proof that this wasn't about traffic flow or community safety. It was about control and land. 2 days later, his cameras captured Karen climbing out of her SUV with a crowbar, prying what was left of the gate from its hinges. She posed dramatically for photos, handing her phone to Roger, snapping pictures of the unsafe structure she herself had destroyed. The smirk on her face told Daniel she was confident no one would ever question her story. Daniel didn't confront her. Not yet. He let her walk away, laughing, while his cameras rolled. By the end of the week, Daniel's folder was full. Photos, videos, audio recordings, time-stamped logs of HOA members trespassing, vandalizing, and plotting to bleed him dry. Still, he knew his evidence alone wouldn't be enough. Karen was skilled at twisting narratives. If he revealed his hand too soon, she'd spin it as paranoia or doctored recordings. He needed timing. He needed impact. The opportunity came sooner than expected. That Friday, the HOA announced a community safety meeting in the Oak Ridge clubhouse. The flyer, delivered smugly to Daniel's mailbox, listed one agenda item in bold. Resolution to remove unauthorized obstructions. Carter Ranch Gate. Daniel stared at the words, his anger simmering into resolve. Perfect, he thought. Let's show them who's been obstructing who. On the night of the meeting, Daniel walked into the clubhouse carrying a plain black case. Heads turned. Conversations hushed. Karen stood at the front with her clipboard, glowing with self-importance as if the outcome was already written. "Welcome, everyone," she began, voice carrying like a preacher's. "Tonight we address a persistent danger to our community's safety, Mr. Carter's unlawful gate. The board has already voted unanimously to remove it, but we believe the residents deserve transparency." Polite applause followed. Karen basked in it like sunlight. Daniel took a seat near the back, calm and silent. He let her go on, let her paint him as selfish, reckless, unneighborly. He watched the heads nod, the whispers of agreement. She was winning them, just as she had planned, and then, when she paused for questions, Daniel stood. "Actually," he said, his voice cutting through the room, "I think the community deserves a fuller picture." Karen's smile faltered. "Mr. Carter, this isn't—" But Daniel had already set his case on the table. With a click, the projector lit up the wall. And there, in full color, was Karen herself, caught on camera, crowbar in hand, ripping his gate apart. Gasps filled the room. Karen's face drained of color. The video rolled on. Karen laughing with Roger about bankrupting him, declaring the land would be cleared for expansion. The audio rang out crisp and damning. The room erupted in murmurs. Some neighbors turned toward Karen with confusion, others with outright disgust. Daniel let it play for a long moment before speaking again, his voice steady, almost quiet. "You've all heard her tell you this is about safety, about access, about the community. But what you just saw is the truth. This isn't about rules. It's about control, and it's about taking what doesn't belong to them." He paused, letting the weight of it sink in. "And as long as I draw breath, they won't take this land." The silence after the video ended was deafening. For a full 5 seconds, no one spoke. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably in their seats, murmurs rippling through the clubhouse like wind through dry grass. Karen's face, usually painted with smug confidence, looked pale and brittle under the fluorescent lights. Then, like a cornered animal, she snapped. "Those recordings are illegal!" she shouted, her voice cracking. "You can't just film people without their consent on private property." Daniel didn't move from his spot. "That road isn't your property, Karen, it's mine. Everything you just saw happened on my land. The law is very clear. I have the right to protect what's mine." The board members flanking her shifted nervously, but Karen pressed on, desperate. "This is slander. He's manipulating footage, splicing words together. You all know me. You know I would never vandalize or—" Her voice broke again as the screen froze on a damning frame, her grinning face, crowbar mid-swing, caught in crystal clarity. Daniel didn't need to say anything. The image spoke louder than words. A man in the audience, an older neighbor who'd once parroted her flyers, stood and cleared his throat. "Karen, is that really you? Because it sure looks like it." Karen whirled on him, eyes flashing. "Howard, sit down. You don't know what you're talking about. This is all a setup. Carter's just bitter because the community expects him to follow the rules like everyone else." But the crowd wasn't with her anymore. One by one, neighbors turned toward each other, whispering. The illusion of her authority cracked like glass. Daniel let the tension build before he added more fuel to the fire. He clicked the remote again, and a new clip began to play. Roger, her right-hand board member, laughing about how the fines would bury Carter and how the ranch would make prime land for development. This time, the reaction was immediate. A woman near the front gasped audibly. "Development? You mean this was never about safety?" Karen's composure crumbled. Her face twisted, desperation spilling over. "Of course it's about safety. He's dangerous. He's always been. He keeps that gate locked to intimidate us, to keep us out. What if there's an emergency?" "Funny," Daniel said, his voice calm but cutting. "How you keep finding your way through a locked gate if it's such a hazard?" Laughter bubbled from the back of the room. The tide had shifted completely, but Karen wasn't done. Her pride couldn't allow retreat. She slammed her clipboard on the table so hard that papers scattered like startled birds. "You people are fools if you think this man cares about you. He doesn't care about the community. He cares about himself. He's selfish, greedy, paranoid. And if you let him win, Oak Ridge will fall apart." Her tirade echoed through the clubhouse, but it no longer landed. Instead, it exposed her, shrill, unstable, cornered. Daniel leaned forward, resting his hands on the table, speaking not just to her but to every eye in the room. "I've cared about this land longer than most of you have lived here. My grandfather built this ranch. My father tended it. And I'll be damned before I let a corrupt board bully me into surrendering what they've decided they're entitled to. That isn't community. That's theft." The crowd erupted, not in applause yet, but in voices rising, questions being hurled at Karen and the board. "Is this true, Karen? Were you planning to sell off Carter's land? Why didn't you tell us the whole story?" Karen's carefully constructed empire of control was unraveling before her eyes. Her cheeks flushed deep red, her voice screeching over the din. "Don't listen to him. Don't you see what he's doing? He's dividing us!" But no one was listening anymore. The authority she'd wielded like a weapon had been stripped bare. Finally, one of the board members, a thin, nervous man named Philip, stood. He tugged at his collar and said what everyone was already thinking. I think we need to pause this meeting and review the facts." The words hit Karen like a slap. She spun toward him, betrayed. "Philip, you can't—" But it was too late. The board was fracturing, the residents whispering angrily, and for the first time, Karen wasn't leading the charge. She was flailing, drowning in the very current she'd once controlled, and Daniel Carter, standing calm and tall at the back of the room, knew the real fight wasn't over yet. But for the first time in weeks, he felt the tide turning in his favor. The clubhouse had never seen such chaos. Voices rose, chairs scraped back, and the once complacent neighbors now demanded answers from the very board they'd trusted. Karen, red-faced and trembling, clutched her clipboard like a shield, barking at residents to calm down, as though she still had authority. But the spell was broken. Enough. Daniel's voice boomed over the noise, steady and commanding. He wasn't shouting, he didn't need to. The weight of calm authority silenced the room more effectively than Karen's shrieks ever had. "Look at the evidence," he said, gesturing toward the frozen image on the projector. "This isn't about rules. It's about greed, about power, and about a few people who thought they could manipulate this entire community into bending to their will." The crowd turned toward Karen, their stares no longer curious but accusatory. She wilted under the scrutiny but still tried to bluster through. "He's lying. This is all fabricated. You can't trust a bitter recluse who thinks the world is out to get him." "Fabricated?" Daniel cut her off. His hand clicked the remote again. Another recording played, this one from just a week earlier, Karen's voice clear as day. "Don't worry, Roger. Once we get his gate removed, we can push for zoning adjustments. That land will be ours by next spring." The words hit like a hammer. A collective gasp filled the air. Karen froze, her face drained of color, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. This time, Daniel didn't need to say a word. "The neighbors did it for him." "You plan to steal his land?" one shouted. "You lied to all of us," another cried. "This isn't leadership, it's corruption." Karen tried to shout them down, but her voice drowned beneath the tide of outrage. Board members who had once nodded along with her agenda now shifted uncomfortably, distancing themselves from her. Even Roger, her closest ally, muttered something about being misled as he avoided her gaze. Philip, the nervous board member, finally stepped forward. His voice shook, but his words carried weight. "On behalf of the HOA board, I motion to suspend Karen from her duties immediately, pending investigation into her conduct." The room erupted in applause. Not polite clapping, but genuine, thunderous relief. Neighbors stood, some cheering, others shaking their heads at the betrayal they'd uncovered. Karen sputtered, shouting about illegality and conspiracies, but the board didn't back her this time. For once, they stood against her. Daniel closed his laptop and gathered his evidence. His work here was done, but he wasn't finished. Not yet. The next morning, armed with the recordings, photos, and copies of the deeds, Daniel drove straight to the county courthouse. His lawyer, a sharp woman named Evelyn with a reputation for dismantling shady HOAs, filed for an injunction against Oak Ridge's board. Within days, a judge reviewed the case. The ruling was swift and brutal. Karen was barred from HOA activities indefinitely. The board was ordered to cease all fines and reimburse Daniel for the thousands they had unlawfully attempted to extract. An investigation into financial mismanagement was launched, putting every member under scrutiny. But the sweetest part came when the judge acknowledged Daniel's land rights explicitly. "The Carter Ranch Access Road," the ruling read, "is private property as deeded and recorded. Any further trespassing by the HOA or its agents will result in criminal charges." For the first time in weeks, Daniel slept soundly. Word spread quickly. Karen's reign of intimidation was over. Neighbors who had once whispered about Daniel now approached him with apologies, bringing pies, shaking his hand, even offering to help repair the gate she'd destroyed. "I should have known better," Howard admitted one evening, his voice heavy with guilt. Karen made it sound so reasonable. "I'm sorry, Daniel." Daniel didn't gloat. He wasn't built that way. He simply nodded, his quiet dignity speaking volumes. What matters is the truth's out now. As for Karen, she vanished from the neighborhood's daily life. Her SUV sat idle in her driveway, curtains drawn tight. Rumors swirled about fines of her own, about legal trouble, about a husband who'd had enough of her schemes. Whatever the truth, her power was gone, reduced to bitter mutterings behind closed doors. Weeks later, the new HOA president, a far more level-headed neighbor named Marlene, stood beside Daniel at the entrance to his ranch. The gate, freshly repaired and sturdier than ever, gleamed in the bright sunlight. "On behalf of Oak Ridge," Marlene said, "we're sorry. What happened to you was wrong. It won't happen again." Daniel gave a rare smile, gripping the gate's latch with pride. "This land's been in my family for generations. It'll stay that way." For him, it wasn't just about winning. It was about restoring dignity, about proving that even against corruption, lies, and arrogance, the truth could still prevail. And as he looked out over the rolling fields of his ranch, the land bathed in sunlight, Daniel Carter knew one thing for certain: Oak Ridge would never forget the day Karen's empire crumbled. If this story impressed you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more HOA dramas where justice finally takes center stage. Your support helps keep these powerful stories alive.